In the vast expanse of the galaxy, there exists a classification system that makes even the most hardened alien warriors shudder in fear. Class 15 Deathworlds. Planets so hostile, so utterly lethal, that survival for more than a few hours is considered impossible. These worlds are nature's ultimate killing machines, designed by cosmic accident to destroy any form of life foolish enough to set foot on their surface. For 3 million years, the Galactic Council has maintained detailed records of every species that has attempted to conquer a Class 15 world. The statistics are as clear as they are terrifying. 0 survivors, 0 successful colonies, 0 exceptions. These worlds don't just kill, they obliterate, leaving no trace that intelligent life ever dared to challenge their supremacy. But what happens when a species arrives that doesn't just survive the impossible, they thrive in it? What happens when beings appear who look at a planet that can melt steel with its rain, crush mountains with its gravity, and birth storms that can tear apart starships and call it a bit challenging? The galaxy's about to learn that humans don't just break rules. They shatter entire classifications. And when humanity sets foot on Kythara, 7, the most lethal Class 15 world ever discovered, something unprecedented will happen. The planet itself will begin to crack under the weight of human determination. This is the story of how a species of seemingly fragile bipeds turned the galaxy's understanding of survival upside down, and why the other races now whisper a new phrase in the dark corners of space stations. Humans arrived, and the planet shattered. The emergency klaxons of the Galactic Council's Deep Space Monitoring Station pierced through the artificial atmosphere like the dying screams of 1,000 worlds. Commander Zethkai of the Althari Empire pressed his 6-fingered hands against his auditory organs, trying to block out the sound that had been haunting the station for the past 3 rotations. "Report," he growled, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had witnessed the birth and death of civilizations. Lieutenant Vexra, a young Kytherian with scales that shimmered nervously in the blue light, approached with a data tablet clutched in her trembling claws. "Sir, the readings from Kythara 7 are unprecedented. The seismic activity has increased by 4,000%. The atmospheric pressure is fluctuating wildly, and the electromagnetic storms are impossible," Zethkai cut her off. "Kythara 7 is a Class 15 death world. Nothing lives there. Nothing can live there. The planet has been stable in its lethality for over 2 million standard years." The lieutenant's scales darkened to a deep purple, indicating extreme distress. "Sir, that's what makes this so disturbing. Something is causing the planet to react. And based on our long-range sensors..." She paused, her voice dropping to a whisper. "There are structures being built on the surface." The words hung in the air, like a death sentence. Zethkai felt his triple heart skip a beat. In his 3 centuries of service to the Council, he had seen species attempt to colonize Class 15 worlds before. The results were always the same. Swift, brutal, and complete annihilation. No exceptions. "Show me," he commanded. The main display screen flickered to life, revealing the hellish landscape of Kythara. 7. The planet was a masterpiece of natural destruction, its surface scarred by massive volcanic ranges that spewed molten metal instead of lava. The atmosphere was a toxic cocktail of sulfuric acid, methane, and compounds so corrosive they could dissolve most starship hulls in minutes. Gravity was 3 times galactic standard, enough to crush most known species under their own weight. And that was during the planet's calm periods. During its active cycles, which occurred every few rotations, the entire world became a furnace of destruction. Lightning storms raged with the power of stellar flares. The ground itself became molten, and winds reached speeds that could strip the flesh from reinforced battle armor. But now, impossibly, there were signs of construction. Massive geometric structures rose from the planet's surface like metal mountains, their surfaces gleaming despite the constant acid rain that should have dissolved them instantly. "Enhance Sector 7, Alpha," Zethkai ordered, his voice barely steady. The image zoomed in, and what they saw defied every law of survival in the known galaxy. Not only were there structures, but there were beings moving around them. Small, bipedal creatures that seemed to walk casually across terrain that should have killed them 1,000 times over. "By the void," whispered Vexra. "They're not wearing environmental suits." Zethkai stared at the screen in stunned silence. The beings appeared to be organic, with pale or dark skin tones and only basic clothing. They moved with purpose and confidence, as if the deadly environment was nothing more than a minor inconvenience.
"Sir," Vexra continued, her voice growing more alarmed, "I'm detecting massive industrial activity,
Whatever these creatures are, they're not just surviving, they're thriving. They've established mining operations, construction facilities, and what appears to be... She paused, rechecking her readings. Agricultural areas. Agriculture? Zethkai repeated the word as if it were a foreign concept. On Kithara. 7? That's impossible. The soil is saturated with compounds that would kill any known plant life. Sir, incoming transmission from the planet's surface. The commander's blood ran cold. No one had ever transmitted from a Class 15 world because no one had ever lived long enough to establish communications. Put it through. The static-filled voice that emerged from the speakers was unlike anything in the galactic databases. It was melodic yet strong, with strange inflections that suggested complex emotional ranges. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Terran Colonial Expedition to anyone monitoring this frequency. We've successfully established our first settlement on this world and are proceeding with Phase 2 construction. The local environment provides some interesting challenges, but nothing our engineering teams can't handle. We're calling our new home New Resilience, and we're already ahead of schedule. The transmission continued with technical details about mining operations, atmospheric processes, and something called terraforming, but Zethkai had stopped listening. His mind was reeling with the implications of what he was hearing. "Get me a direct line to the High Council," he ordered. "Priority Alpha status." Within moments, the holographic forms of the 12 most powerful beings in the galaxy materialized around the command station. The High Council represented every major civilization, each member selected for their wisdom and experience in handling galactic crises. High Councillor Threndai of the Vorthen Collective spoke first, his ancient voice carrying the weight of millennia. "Commander Zethkai, explain the nature of this emergency." Zethkai gestured to the display screen. "Honored councillors, we have a situation that defies all known classifications. An unknown species has not only survived on Kithara 7, but appears to be establishing a permanent colony." The silence that followed was deafening. Several councillors exchanged glances that spoke of shared disbelief and growing concern. Councillor Yithara of the Cephalan hierarchy leaned forward, her massive brain casing pulsing with agitated thought patterns. "Commander, Kithara 7 has a documented kill rate of 100% for any life form above the microbial level. Are you certain your sensors are functioning correctly?"
We've run full diagnostics 3 times, Counselor.
"The readings are accurate. But that's not the most disturbing part." Zethkai paused, gathering his courage. "The planet itself is changing. Seismic activity has increased dramatically, and our geological specialists believe the planetary structure may be becoming unstable." High Councillor Threndai's expression darkened. "Explain." "We believe these beings, they call themselves humans, are somehow affecting the planet's core systems. Their industrial activities appear to be interfering with the natural geological processes that maintain Kithara 7's deadly equilibrium." The implications were staggering. Class 15 worlds were considered natural constants, unchanging in their lethality for millions of years. The idea that any species could alter such a world was beyond comprehension. Councillor Brixton of the Silicon Confederacy, whose crystalline form chimed with anxiety, voiced what everyone was thinking. If they can survive and modify a Class 15 world, what does that mean for our understanding of biological limitations? What does it mean for the safety of our own worlds? Before anyone could answer, Lieutenant Vextra interrupted with urgency in her voice. "Sir, we're receiving multiple transmissions now. It appears they have an entire fleet in orbit around Kithara 7. The display screen shifted to show space around the deadly planet. Where there should have been empty void, punctuated only by the occasional debris of failed expeditions, there was now a bustling hub of activity. Massive ships moved in orderly formations. Shuttles traveled constantly between the fleet and the planet's surface, and construction platforms were building what appeared to be a space station. "How many ships?" asked High Councillor Threndai. "Initial count shows over 200 vessels of various sizes, with more arriving through what appears to be some form of faster-than-light transportation system. The humans weren't just surviving on Kithara 7. They were colonizing it with the efficiency of a species that had done this many times before." Captain Chen's voice crackled through the speakers again. "This is New Resilience Control to Fleet Command. The atmospheric processes are working better than expected. We should have breathable air in the primary settlement within the next rotation. The mining teams report that the local mineral deposits are incredibly rich, and the construction crews have found ways to use the planet's natural electromagnetic activity to power our facilities. Commander HFY felt a chill run through his exoskeleton. They weren't just surviving the planet's deadly environment, they were harnessing it. High Counselor Threndai stood slowly, his ancient frame radiating an authority that had guided the galaxy for millennia. Commander, I want a full investigation team assembled immediately. We need to understand what we're dealing with. If this species can colonize a Class 15 world, they represent either the greatest opportunity or the greatest threat the galaxy has ever known. Sir, Vexra interjected again. There's something else. Our deep space sensors are detecting similar activities on 17 other Class 15 worlds across the galaxy. The silence that followed was absolute. 17 Class 15 worlds. 17 planets that should have been utterly impossible to colonize, all showing signs of human activity. Counselor Yathara's brain casing pulsed rapidly with intense thought. 17 worlds simultaneously? This isn't exploration, this is systematic expansion. These humans aren't just trying to survive on one impossible world, they're claiming multiple death worlds as if they were garden planets. The implications were staggering. For millions of years, the galaxy had operated under the assumption that certain worlds were simply too dangerous for colonization. These worlds served as natural barriers, dead zones that provided security through their very impossibility. Now, a new species was treating these barriers as if they were merely obstacles to overcome. There's more. Captain Chen's transmission continued. Our geological teams have made an interesting discovery. The planet's core appears to be cooling due to our geothermal extraction operations. We estimate that within a few rotations, Kithara 7 will no longer classify as a Class 15 world. We're essentially taming the planet. Commander HFY looked around at the holographic forms of the most powerful beings in the galaxy and saw something he had never seen before in their ancient faces. Fear. Not just concern or caution, but genuine fear. These humans weren't just surviving the impossible, they were rewriting the fundamental laws of what was possible. And if they could tame a Class 15 world, what else could they do? The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their numbers. It was their complete inability to accept that something couldn't be done. When the universe said impossible, humans heard challenging. When physics said deadly, humans heard interesting. And now they had arrived at 17 of the most dangerous worlds in the galaxy, looked at environments that had killed every other species that dared approach them, and decided to make them home. The countdown to a new galactic age had begun, and nobody knew whether it would end in humanity's triumph or in the shattering of everything the galaxy thought it knew about the limits of life itself. 3 rotations after the first contact, the investigation fleet assembled by the Galactic Council hung in space at what they considered a safe distance from Kithara. 7. The massive formation included representatives from every major civilization, armed with the most advanced sensors and protective technology the galaxy could provide. Ambassador Kelfnar of the Hegemony stood on the bridge of the flagship, his crystalline exoskeleton reflecting the eerie light emanating from the planet below. He had volunteered for this mission despite knowing it might be his last. Someone had to make contact with these humans, and as the galaxy's premier xenobiologist, he was the logical choice. "Status report," he commanded, his harmonic voice resonating through the ship's atmosphere. Science Officer Trixel, a Vorthak with multiple sensory organs, approached with data streaming across her neural interfaces. "Sir, the changes to Kithara 7 are accelerating. The planet's electromagnetic signature has shifted dramatically. Surface temperature has dropped by 12% in the last rotation alone, and the atmospheric toxicity levels are decreasing." Ambassador Kelfnar found this information deeply troubling. Class 15 worlds weren't supposed to change. Their deadly nature was considered a cosmic constant, as reliable as stellar fusion or gravitational forces. And the human settlements, they've expanded significantly. We now count 47 separate installations across the planet's surface, connected by what appears to be a transportation network that operates despite the atmospheric conditions. Most disturbing of all, sir, we're detecting what can only be described as recreational facilities. The ambassador's exoskeleton chimed with confusion. Recreational facilities? Yes, sir. Areas that appear designed for leisure activities. Our analysts believe they may have established sporting venues and social gathering spaces. The concept was so alien that the ambassador had difficulty processing it. These beings had turned the most lethal planet in known space into a place where they engaged in recreational activities. "Sir," Trixal continued, "we're receiving an incoming transmission from the planet's surface. It appears to be directed specifically at our fleet. Put it through." The transmission that filled the bridge was clear and strong, without the interference that should have been caused by Kithara 7's electromagnetic storms. This is Director Marcus Webb of New Resilience to the fleet currently observing our operations. We've been monitoring your position for the past few rotations and wanted to extend an invitation. You're welcome to visit our settlement, though we should warn you that our atmospheric processes have only managed to reduce the acid concentration to levels that most species would still find lethal. We've prepared some environmental suits based on our scans of your vessels that should keep you safe during a short visit. The ambassador stared at the communication console in amazement. The humans were not only aware of their presence, but were inviting them to visit a Class 15 world as if it were a routine diplomatic meeting. This is Ambassador Kelthner of the Galactic Council. We appreciate your invitation, Director Webb, but I must inform you that our protocols classify Kithara 7 as utterly lethal to all known forms of life. Surely you understand the risks involved. The response came with what the universal translators identified as humor. Ambassador, with all due respect, if we were concerned about risks, we wouldn't be here in the first place. We have it. We've had teams working on the surface for over a rotation now, and our casualty rate is actually lower than most of our mining operations on more conventional worlds. The main hazards we're dealing with are slippery surfaces from the acid rain and the occasional equipment malfunction. Nothing our safety protocols can't handle. The casual tone with which Director Webb discussed surviving on a Class 15 world sent chills through every being on the bridge. These humans spoke of walking on the surface of Kithara 7 the way other species might discuss a trip to their local market. Director Webb, the ambassador continued carefully, our records indicate that no previous expedition to a Class 15 world has ever reported survivors. How is it that your species has not only survived but thrived in this environment? There was a brief pause before Webb responded, and when he did, there was a note of genuine surprise in his voice. Wait. You're telling me that other species have tried to colonize worlds like this and failed? How is that possible? I mean, sure, it's challenging, but the mineral wealth alone makes it worth the effort. Plus, once you get used to the gravity, it's actually great for physical conditioning. Our athletes are going to be monsters when they go back to standard gravity worlds. The ambassador felt his consciousness reeling. The humans weren't just surviving on Kithara 7, they were treating it as an opportunity for physical improvement. Science Officer Trixel suddenly tensed, her sensory organs detecting something that made her neural patterns spike with alarm. Sir, I'm reading massive geological instability. The planet's tectonic system is showing signs of catastrophic failure. Before the ambassador could respond, Director Webb's voice came through the speakers with noticeable urgency. Fleet Command, we're showing some significant seismic activity here. Our geological teams think we may have extracted a bit too much material from the planetary core. We're implementing stabilization procedures, but we wanted to give you a heads up in case you want to move to a safer distance. The casual way the humans announced they had accidentally destabilized the core of a Class 15 world left the entire bridge crew speechless. What they considered a minor engineering challenge would have been catastrophic for any other species. Sir, Trixol whispered, the readings indicate that the planet's structural integrity is compromised. If current trends continue, Kithara 7 could undergo complete geological collapse within the next few rotations. Ambassador Kelthnar made a decision that would change galactic history. Prepare a shuttle. I'm going down to the surface. The bridge erupted in protests from his staff, but he silenced them with a gesture. If these humans can walk on that planet's surface, then surely our best environmental suits can protect me for a brief diplomatic meeting. We need to understand what we're dealing with. 2 hours later, the ambassador found himself descending through the toxic atmosphere of Kithara 7 in a specially shielded diplomatic shuttle. The journey that should have been impossible was made routine by human guidance systems that navigated through the electromagnetic storms as if they were gentle breezes. The landing platform they directed him to was a marvel of engineering that shouldn't have been able to exist. Constructed from materials that resisted the planet's corrosive atmosphere, it stood as a testament to human adaptability and ingenuity. Director Webb met him personally, a gesture that would have been unthinkable on any other world. The human stood without environmental protection, wearing only what appeared to be a light protective jacket and some form of breathing apparatus. Ambassador Kelthnar, Webb said, extending his hand in what the ambassador recognized as a human greeting gesture. Welcome to New Resilience. I have to say, your environmental suit is impressive. Our engineers are always interested in seeing how other species handle hostile environments. The ambassador, encased in a suit that represented the pinnacle of galactic protective technology, stared at the lightly dressed human in disbelief.
Director Webb, are you not concerned about the atmospheric conditions? Webb glanced around casually.
Oh, this? Yeah, it's a bit rough. But our medical teams have developed some pretty effective treatments for acid exposure. Plus, the breathing masks filter out most of the nasty stuff. You should see some of our mining worlds. Now those are challenging. As they walked through the settlement, the ambassador witnessed scenes that defied everything he thought he knew about survival. Human children played in designated areas, protected by force fields that kept out the worst of the atmospheric toxins, but still exposed them to conditions that would kill most adult members of other species. Construction crews worked openly on expanding the settlement, their equipment modified to operate in the corrosive environment. How many of your people are stationed here? The ambassador asked. Currently, we have about 50,000 colonists, with more arriving every few days. We're expecting to reach full settlement capacity of 200,000 within the next rotation. After that, we'll probably expand to the other continents. 200k beings living permanently on a Class 15 world. The number was so staggering that the ambassador had to recalibrate his understanding of what was possible. Director, our sensors indicate that the planet's geological structure is becoming unstable. Are you aware of this situation? Webb nodded seriously. Yeah, our deep core mining operations have been a bit more aggressive than originally planned. We've extracted about 30% more material than our initial projections called for. The good news is that we've discovered mineral concentrations that are incredibly valuable. The bad news is that we may have compromised the planet's structural integrity. The casual way Webb discussed potentially destroying an entire world left the ambassador speechless. Director, if the planet's core destabilizes, the entire world could collapse. That's what our geologists are saying, Webb agreed. We've got teams working on stabilization procedures, but if worst comes to worst, we'll just evacuate to one of our other settlements. We've got 17 worlds in development, so losing one wouldn't be catastrophic for our expansion plans. 17 worlds. The humans had casually mentioned their presence on 17 Class 15 worlds as if they were discussing vacation properties. How is your species able to survive in these environments? The ambassador finally asked the question that had been burning in his mind since first contact. Webb considered the question for a moment. I'm not sure I understand. Survive what? The gravity? The atmosphere? The electromagnetic storms? I mean, they're challenges, sure, but nothing we haven't dealt with before. Our homeworld wasn't exactly a garden paradise, you know. We evolved on a planet with pretty harsh conditions, so this isn't really that different. The ambassador realized with growing amazement that humans didn't consider Kithara 7 exceptionally dangerous. To them, it was simply another world with a unique set of environmental factors to overcome. Ambassador, Webb continued, I have to ask, what do other species consider challenging environments? Because from our preliminary surveys of galactic civilization, it seems like most people live on worlds that are almost artificially perfect. How do you handle adversity? How do you push your limits and grow as individuals and societies? The question revealed a fundamental difference between humans and the rest of galactic civilization. While other species sought perfect, safe environments, humans seemed to thrive on challenge and adversity. Suddenly, alarms began sounding throughout the settlement. Webb's casual demeanor shifted to focused professionalism as he activated a communication device. This is Webb. Report. Director, we've got a major seismic event developing. Core pressure is spiking beyond safe parameters. Recommend immediate evacuation of all non-essential personnel. Webb turned to the ambassador. I'm sorry, but we're going to have to cut this meeting short. We need to implement emergency protocols. As evacuation procedures began around them, the ambassador watched in amazement as humans moved with practiced efficiency to address a crisis that would have panicked any other species. They weren't running in terror from the collapsing world. They were implementing contingency plans as if this were a routine occurrence. Director, the ambassador said as they headed back to the landing platform, what happens if you can't stabilize the planet? Webb shrugged with characteristic human nonchalance. Then we'll have learned valuable lessons about core extraction limits that we can apply to our other operations. Science is about learning from failures as much as successes. As the ambassador's shuttle lifted off from the surface of the dying world, he watched through the viewport as humans continued their evacuation procedures. Even as their planet collapsed beneath them, they maintained order, saved their equipment and resources, and planned for their next attempt. The trip back to the fleet gave him time to compose his report to the Galactic Council. But how could he explain what he had witnessed? How could he make them understand that humanity didn't just survive the impossible, they embraced it as a natural part of their existence? Below them, Cathara 7 continued its slow collapse, becoming the first Class 15 world in galactic history to die not from natural evolution, but from the determined efforts of a species that refused to accept limitations. The humans had arrived, and they had indeed shattered the planet. But more importantly, they had shattered every assumption the galaxy held about the limits of biological determination and adaptability. 6 rotations after the collapse of Cathara. 7. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in the ancient chamber that had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations. High Counselor Threndai stood before the assembled representatives, his aged form carrying the weight of a decision that would reshape the galaxy's future. Honored delegates, he began, his voice echoing through the chamber, we gather today to address the most significant development in galactic history since the formation of the Council itself. The species known as humans have not only achieved the impossible by colonizing Class 15 worlds, they have fundamentally altered our understanding of biological limitations. The massive display screen behind him showed a map of the galaxy with 17 red markers, indicating the locations of former Class 15 worlds. Each marker told the same story: human colonization followed by rapid planetary modification and eventual reclassification. Ambassador Kelfnar, still bearing the psychic scars of his visit to the destroyed world, rose from his position. Counselors, my direct observations confirm what our remote sensors have detected. These humans do not merely survive hostile environments, they transform them. In the short time they have been active in our galaxy, they have eliminated 17 of our most reliable natural barriers. Counselor Yathara's massive brain casing pulsed with agitated thought patterns. The implications are staggering. If they can modify Class 15 worlds at will, no natural boundary can contain their expansion. They could theoretically colonize any world in the galaxy. The chamber filled with anxious murmurs from the assembled delegates. For millions of years, the galactic community had operated under the assumption that certain worlds were simply off limits. These natural barriers had provided security and stability, ensuring that no single species could expand without limits. There's more, High Counselor Threndai continued. Our intelligence networks report that humans have established diplomatic contact with over 200 minor species that were previously considered too primitive or isolated for galactic society. They appear to be forming some sort of alliance based on what they call mutual assistance and development. This news sent shockwaves through the chamber. The established galactic order depended on careful control of which species were allowed to participate in interstellar civilization. The humans seemed to be ignoring these protocols entirely. Councillor Brixton of the Silicon Confederacy chimed with metallic anxiety. Are we to understand that they are unilaterally expanding galactic civilization without council oversight? Before the High Counselor could respond, an aide rushed into the chamber with urgent information. Sir, we're receiving a direct transmission from the human fleet. They're requesting permission to address the council. The silence that followed was profound. Never in galactic history had an unrecognized species requested to address the council directly. Put them through, High Counselor Threndai commanded after a moment's consideration. The central display screen flickered, and the image of a human appeared. She was middle-aged by their standards, with graying hair and eyes that held an intelligence and determination that transcended species boundaries. Honored council members, she began, her voice carrying through the chamber's translation systems. I am Admiral Sarah Chen, representing the Terran Colonial Initiative. We understand there has been some concern about our expansion activities, and we felt it was important to address those concerns directly. High Counselor Threndai stepped forward. Admiral Chen, your species has fundamentally disrupted the galactic order by colonizing worlds that were considered impossible to inhabit. Your actions have eliminated natural barriers that have maintained stability for millions of years.
Admiral Chen nodded thoughtfully. We understand your concern, Counselor.
However, I think there may be a misunderstanding about our intentions. We're not trying to disrupt anything. We're simply expanding into areas that nobody else seemed to be using. The casual way she dismissed the significance of Class 15 worlds sent ripples of amazement through the chamber. Admiral, Ambassador Kelfnar interjected. Those worlds were not unused. They were considered uninhabitable by all known forms of life. Chen smiled with what the translators identified as gentle amusement. Ambassador, with respect, Just because something hasn't been done before doesn't mean it can't be done. Our species has a long history of expanding into environments that others considered impossible. It's how we've always grown and developed. Counselor Yuthara leaned forward, her brain casing pulsing rapidly. Admiral Chen, are you saying that your species routinely colonizes hostile environments? That's exactly what I'm saying, Chen replied. Our homeworld was what you might classify as a mild Class 10 Deathworld. Extreme temperature variations, seismic activity, severe weather patterns, and a generally unstable ecosystem. We learned early that if you want to thrive, you have to adapt to whatever environment you find yourself in. The revelation that humans had evolved on what the galaxy would classify as a death world explained everything. While other species had developed on stable, life-supporting worlds, humans had been forged by adversity from the very beginning. Admiral, High Counselor Threndai said carefully, what are your species' intentions regarding galactic expansion? Chen considered the question seriously. Counselor, we want to continue expanding and developing, obviously. But we also want to help others do the same. We've already made contact with hundreds of species that your council seems to have overlooked. Many of them have incredible potential but lack the resources or knowledge to develop their capabilities. You speak of species we have overlooked, Councillor Brixton chimed. The Council carefully evaluates each species for readiness to join galactic civilization. With respect, Chen responded, your evaluation process seems to be based on achieving a level of technological and social development that matches your own.
But what about species that might develop along different paths?
What about those who might contribute something unique but different from what you expect? The question struck at the heart of galactic civilization's fundamental assumptions. The Council had always operated under the belief that there was a single path to advanced civilization, and only species that followed that path were worthy of inclusion. Admiral, Ambassador Kelthnar asked, what exactly do you propose? Chen's expression became more serious. We propose a new approach to galactic civilization. Instead of maintaining artificial barriers and exclusive clubs, we suggest expanding the definition of what's possible. We've already begun establishing trade relationships and mutual defense agreements with over 200 species that were previously considered primitive or isolated. The chamber erupted in concerned murmurs. The humans weren't just challenging the physical limitations of what worlds could be colonized, they were challenging the social and political structure of galactic civilization itself. Many of these species, Chen continued, have capabilities that your established civilizations lack. There are aquatic species with biotechnology advances that surpass anything we've seen, underground species with mineral extraction techniques that make our mining operations look primitive, species that have developed completely different approaches to energy production, transportation, and social organization. High Counselor Threndai felt the weight of millennia pressing down on him. Admiral, you are describing a fundamental reorganization of galactic society. Not reorganization, Chen corrected. Expansion. The current system isn't broken, it's just limited. You've created a stable civilization among species that are very similar to each other. We're suggesting that it might be time to see what's possible when you include species with different strengths and different approaches to solving problems. Councillor Yuthara's brain casing pulsed thoughtfully. You speak of different approaches, but how do we maintain stability and order with such diversity? Chen's response carried the confidence of a species that had thrived on chaos, the same way any ecosystem maintains stability, through diversity, adaptation, and mutual support. Homogeneous systems are stable until they encounter a challenge they weren't designed to handle. Diverse systems are more resilient because they have multiple ways of responding to unexpected situations. As if to emphasize her point, alerts began sounding throughout the council chamber. An aide rushed to High Counselor Threndai with urgent information. Sir, our deep space sensors are detecting massive gravitational anomalies in the outer rim. It appears to be some form of natural disaster that could affect dozens of systems. Without hesitation, Admiral Chen spoke up. Admiral, we've been monitoring those anomalies as well. Several of our allied species have experience with gravitational manipulation and spatial engineering. If the Council is willing to accept assistance, we could have response teams in position within 2 rotations. The offer highlighted the fundamental difference between the human approach and the traditional Council methodology. Where the Council would spend rotations in committee meetings to develop a response plan, the humans and their allies were already prepared to act. High Counselor Threndai found himself facing the most difficult decision of his long career. Accept help from an unauthorized alliance of species, setting a precedent that could undermine the Council's authority forever, or maintain protocols while potentially allowing a disaster to unfold. "Admiral Chen," he said finally, "what assurances can you provide that your alliance will respect established territorial boundaries and existing agreements?" "The same assurances that any neighbor provides," Chen replied. "We'll respect your space if you respect ours, and we'll help each other when disaster strikes. We're not trying to conquer or replace anyone. We're trying to expand what's possible for everyone." The gravitational anomaly alerts intensified, and reports began coming in of spatial distortions affecting inhabited systems. The Council faced an immediate crisis that their traditional methods might not be able to address quickly enough. Ambassador Kelfnar stood slowly. "High Counselor, I recommend we accept Admiral Chen's offer of assistance while opening formal diplomatic channels to discuss the establishment of new protocols for galactic expansion and inclusion." The vote that followed would be remembered as the moment galactic civilization evolved beyond its ancient limitations. By a narrow margin, the Council voted to accept human assistance and begin negotiations for a new framework of galactic society. As human and allied ships moved swiftly to address the gravitational crisis, Admiral Chen made one final statement to the Council. "Councillors, 6 rotations ago you wondered what it meant that humans could survive on Class 15 worlds. Today, you have your answer. It means that when the galaxy faces challenges that seem impossible, you now have allies who specialize in making the impossible merely difficult." Over the following months, the gravitational crisis was resolved through the combined efforts of dozens of species using techniques and technologies that none had possessed alone. The success led to the establishment of the Expanded Galactic Alliance, a new organization that operated alongside the traditional Council, but with radically different principles of inclusion and cooperation. Class 15 worlds were reclassified as human-suitable environments, and several other categories of previously impossible environments were opened for colonization by species with appropriate adaptations. The rigid barriers that had defined galactic civilization for millennia began to dissolve, replaced by a more dynamic and adaptable approach to interstellar society. Years later, historians would mark the arrival of humans at Kithara 7 as the beginning of the Second Galactic Age. Not because humans had conquered the galaxy, but because they had taught it that limitations were often just failures of imagination. The humans had arrived, and while they had indeed shattered planets, more importantly, they had shattered the galaxy's conception of what was possible. In doing so, they had opened doorways to a future where the phrase impossible had lost its meaning, and the only limit to galactic civilization was the collective willingness to grow and adapt. In the end, the greatest strength of humanity wasn't their ability to survive hostile environments. It was their inability to accept that growth and progress had limits. They looked at the galaxy's carefully maintained boundaries and saw not barriers but merely the starting point for their next great adventure.